Hello, everyone. Welcome. You're listening to 27 Degrees Sag. We're broadcasting from the Galactic Center. I'm your host, Kim Lalo. I'm an astrologer, a psychic medium, and a feng shui consultant. And tonight, our show is going to touch on some subjects that you may not hear about. It's not your typical subject, but we're going to find out about it. And before you know it, you're going to see how this particular topic is going to be within reach within a wonderful debut novel that my particular special guest has debuted and has won two award-winning prizes for this particular novel. And in the meantime, I want to tell you, I want to get done with a little bit of business tonight, only because as we're speaking right now, the moon's in Capricorn. I got to take care of business. But next week, I am going to be on by myself. I'm going to be doing psychic readings. I know you all have questions out there. So if you would like to get your questions on in the beginning of the show, I would love to answer them for you. We're also going to be talking about a lot of downloads that I have received through this particular very intense pair of eclipses that we have had. And it has to do with clarifying the subjects about exactly how we are going to go forward in the future in our next period that's coming up. And we're going to be talking all about that. I want to make sure that you don't miss it because we're going to have the show going live 1 hour later. And that it will be 7 o'clock Eastern Standard Time next Wednesday, just so you know. All righty. I just had to get that out there. And now we are going to introduce my new spiritual friend. She has done so many things. I don't even know where to begin, but I've got to begin somewhere. So our wonderful guest this evening is Deborah S Greenhut. She earned her BA in English from Middlebury College and a PhD from Rutgers University. Her poems and cultural reviews have appeared in print and online. She also had a way off Broadway production of Difficult Subjects, and it was selected for the best plays of the Strawberry Festival. She received a Princeton Poetry Prize, and The Hoarder's Wife is her debut novel, and that's the topic we are going to be talking about. She's going to be sharing her experience about writing the book and also her personal experience regarding hoarding. Deborah's worn so many hats. She's a teacher, a writer, a manuscript reader, a copywriter. She's a certified life coach, a travel writer, a photographer. It goes on and on. I just want to say this prize-winning playwright and poet, I just want to give her a new name and a new hat to wear, and it is a word master. And here she is right here this evening. Put your hands together for Deborah Greenhut. Welcome, Deborah.
Welcome. I'm very touched by that introduction. Thank you so much, Kimla. It's great to be here.
Thanks so much for being here. You know, being able to take vowels and consonants and just kind of making them into these wonderful stories. It's like waving a magic wand. Have you always had this innate talent?
I think so. I read a book about a fairy doll when I was 8 years old, and I immediately wrote a poem about it. And I went home and told my mother I wanted to be an author. And she looked at me and she said, "You're not going to make very much money doing that. You should be something else instead and maybe do that on the side." And she's right, but it hasn't stopped me from telling stories. And certainly as a teacher, I got to take advantage of a lot of that.
Right. I know there's a lot of people that love the Velveteen Rabbit and, you know, when they're, you know, going through and being introduced to the storybook world. And I think a lot of children these days see so much visual in, video or movies, or they're so accessible. When I was a kid, I just couldn't wait to go to a movie. And now the kids are inundated, with the computer and everything. And I think maybe twirling the words and to match an emotion, I hope it does not fade away. And I want to ask you a question. Who is your favorite poet?
John Keats.
Oh, okay. You like John Keats. All righty. And what?
A few others.
And a few others. And when did you start? When did you start maybe seriously writing?
I think I tried submitting poetry to magazines like The Atlantic and Harper's when I was in 12th grade. So I was about 17 or 18. And I took creative writing in college along with other English types of classes that I did. And let's see. I think I worked seriously as a playwright during the 90s up into around 2001. So I kind of focused on that particular art. And before that, I had a few poems published on the web in different journals. I haven't finished a book of poetry, but I have a lot of manuscripts, let's say.
Right, right. Poetry is such a, I don't know, it is such an emotional, it is such an emotional way of getting your idea across or your feeling across that that I think sometimes it's kind of maybe hard to approach or hard to assimilate. And I feel like the art, I don't want the art to go away. I don't want it to be lost. I love it. So please, publish your manuscript, because I think the romantic stage of poets just in general. I love it when, poets, they pick up a guitar and then all of a sudden we have a beautiful song and, all of that. And especially, I just want to say, especially, in our particular generation, songwriting is just such a fabulous background to our lives. And it meant so much to everyone. Well, hey, everybody, I know you're coming into the chat room. If you have any questions at all for Deborah, make sure you pop it on there, or myself, and we'll make sure that we get to them. I know you're all kind of clamoring in here, and I hope I get a full page. If I'm missing your particular comment or question, make sure you put it in the second time around as well. Deborah, we have this debut novel, and it came out in April. How is it being received?
Well, I've gotten some very positive notices from places like Booklist, which recommends books to all of the libraries in America. So that was exciting. They said, you definitely want to pick up this debut novel. So that was just like manna from heaven for me. It was wonderful. And I've received 2 awards from Speak Up Talk Radio, which is an organization that supports charities for women who've been abused. So it was exciting to me, not just to get the award, but also to be supporting a community of people who really need our help. So that's been exciting, and my friends are reading the book and telling me all good things about it. So I'm thrilled. I'm thrilled.
It's a difficult subject, and coming from a personal space, I was wondering if you could tell us a little bit about your personal experience and how you decided to write about it.
I was actually married to a man who hoarded, and this escalated over a period of 35 years. He suffered from a number of disorders, and hoarding was, I think, a consequence of all of that mental chaos that he was living with. And after the 35 years, it was his temper that got out of control. I don't think I would have left because of the hoarding. I loved him very much. But finally, there came a day when I could not be around that anymore. So I wasn't going to write about it. I really wanted to close the door and say, I'm not going to think about this, because I was able to move on. But unfortunately, he decided to, he didn't decide, that's not the right way to put it. He suicided, and it just changed my world once again. So I started to go back over my journals, my diaries that I had saved, and thought back over things that had happened in our lives. And I thought, how did we get to this place? How, not that I never thought about it before, but I started to look at it. And pretty soon I was writing a memoir, actually. And I decided I didn't want to put it out there in that form. So I went back after the memoir and wrote a novel about that type of experience. So the title character, the hoarder's wife, is named Grace Berg, and that's not me, but there are some elements of what I experienced there, and to the best of my ability, trying to account for what was happening to my spouse at the same time.
Right. You know, it's a difficult subject to approach, but can you tell us a little bit about what exactly hoarding is?
It's evolved over time. Now we consider, or the therapeutic community considers it to be a disorder. It used to be looked at as a consequence of possibly obsessive compulsive disorders or ADHD. And while my husband suffered from both of those things, it turned out, and we didn't know that when we got married, but that came up after about 20 years of marriage, we learned that. It is, I think disorder is the best word for it, because it does disorder your life. It causes you to save things that you don't need, including up to and including garbage. If you become a serious level 5 hoarder, and I think that's the best word for it. It's just complete disorder, and it robs you of your ability to make choices somehow. I think it's also a comfort to people who do it. It is probably relieving some kind of anxiety, and many therapists now believe that it comes from a trauma of some sort, possibly a childhood trauma. So that's a very complex set of things to look at, and it's difficult to stop. I can share that with you. I've watched someone struggle with it, and it is very difficult to stop.
Right, right. You know, doing a little bit of research on this subject, it's just a persistent difficulty with parting with possessions. And they go through a major distress for parting with these particular items that they have projected perhaps an emotion to, or some type of an attachment that they feel they have intricate value that perhaps does not have any value, or perhaps we just can't see the value in what they are, you know, constantly bringing into the home is what usually happens. And another thing is that you said the word compulsive disorder. It's something that they cannot help themselves to do. They feel the need that they have to acquire things, and this excessive acquisition. What I find is so interesting about it is that the more they bring in, the safer they feel. Did you find that?
Up to a point that was true. And I think after a certain point, though, like any other kind of compulsion, it seemed to drive the need for more. So there was never a point where my husband seemed to feel comfortable with the level of things that he had.
That's interesting. That's really interesting. Yeah. Yeah. So he was never full. He was never, you know, satisfied with
never satisfied. Yeah.
Right. Yeah. It was just, you know, everyday compulsive. Yeah. Yeah. And, you know, the funny thing about this, all of this, is that once it starts getting out of control, did you feel in denial, or did you avoid people coming over, or, family members, or, how did that feel?
Well, I think we went through all of the above. At first, it seemed to be a lot of paper clutter. He was a professor, I was a professor. We had a lot of papers and books, so I don't know if either of us really noticed what was accumulating. Although pretty early on, a lot of his collections of papers would be blocking furniture or blocking access to certain parts of the house, and it seemed to move around. So I didn't feel it was something that was going to really imperil us, but eventually that's what happened. And I did want to say also, my husband was an expert in why things break. He studied failure analysis, and anything that ever broke had to be kept in our house. And I don't know if that's where it started, that he was comforted having his samples around him, and then it just escalated into some other thing, some much larger collection impulse.
So did you see the absolute time when clutter surpassed clutter and started really getting into that particular, wow, we've got a problem here?
I'm not sure I could say the absolute time. I think part of what happened, I was very frustrated about it, and I thought, well, I could just clean it up for you. And I tried that, and many people do that. I tried removing things that were clearly not useful anymore, and he would get very agitated. So I stopped doing that. And I think I was house blind. I don't know how else to put it, for a long time. But as my children grew up and were starting college, they seemed to avoid coming home as much as they possibly could. And finally, after they graduated, they told me that they couldn't visit our house anymore. They would never bring a girlfriend to visit, or ultimately their wives and children. And I think that's part of what made me wake up. I knew it was there, and I had talked to counselors about it myself, and we just couldn't seem to get any kind of help that was going to stop this. And I don't think my husband wanted to stop. I think it gave him a lot of inner peace. So he wasn't invested in that process very much.
A lot of times when we see our partners or someone that we love very much going through something, sometimes we think we can reach them by doing it as well. Did you ever find that you got caught up in it too? Like bringing things home for him and thinking, well, if I kind of join in, maybe he'll listen to me?
That didn't happen, but I did find that the amount of space I could occupy in the house just kept getting smaller and smaller. And I had to keep making adjustments to accommodate the need he had. He'd want another closet, or he would take over a whole other room. And I spent a year trying to find a bigger house and get him to agree to move there, because I thought that was our problem for a while. I was in pretty big denial, I would say. And I thought, well, if we just had a big enough house, we could solve this problem. And that wasn't it at all.
That wasn't it at all. Right. And when you experience this kind of disorder, I was reading about they really experience inner turmoil, anxiety when you try to take these things away from them. I do know that sometimes, even though they're collecting things or they're acquiring things, they're buying things, and perhaps even if they're put into like a storage locker or the basement, or, another side shed that's in the backyard or something like that, they do need to have these containers of their particular things. And I did read that it could stem from different traumas, absolutely. But it's about someone forcefully taking something away from them. And go ahead.
I can tell you a story that my husband told me, and I think I can't help but think this had something to do with it. When he was a child, his sister got the other bedroom in a two-bedroom apartment, and his parents said, well, you can sleep in the dining room because we don't have another bedroom, and she has to have her own room. And he was never allowed really to have any personal space in his home. And when we moved into our house, we were in an apartment first, but when we moved into our house, he told me he didn't want to ever see an empty counter or table. He wanted to be able to put his things there and leave them there, and he would remove them if we were going to have people over or eat there, but he didn't see the point of having an empty table. And I thought that was a strange kind of Waterloo to
Right.
come up with.
Right.
And as I looked back at our lives together, and when he did tell me that story, I thought, wow, that kind of speaks volumes about your feelings about the space around you.
I would understand that and have compassion towards that as well.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. I could see that. Being a feng shui consultant and being certified in space clearing and knowing what energy everything has, especially as far as having an energy field around things. What it actually does is every time you bring something in, especially if it has negative energy to it, or perhaps it belonged to someone else. We were always taught if you're going to buy used furniture, you clear it, whether it's with sage or salt or whatever you have, you clear the item because sensitive people can run their hands through it and basically tell you the story about who owned this piece and what happened with this piece. And it adds to your particular aura or your energy field, and you can take on these particular dense energies or negative energies. And what it does is it actually starts not only clogging up or cluttering up your particular space that you're living in, but it also starts on the body as well. And depending on where these particular areas are, it reflects exactly where these particular clogs are happening within your circulatory system, your spinal cord, and all of the rest of it. Because in feng shui, what we have is we have your physical body. If you put your head at the front door and your arms and your legs out like spread eagle, and you look at the structure of your home, where is it cut up? Where are the rooms missing perhaps? Or where is the clutter forming? Where are the beams that are cutting across? Is it your back? Do you have beams, that you're sleeping under? All of these things really do affect your particular aura and your particular potential to be the best that you can be, because it's almost like you not only do you have a monkey on your back, but you have this huge structure and all of these negative vibratory rates from all of these items and objects. And what's interesting with this particular disorder is when they give an emotion to, let's just say, a piece of garbage or something that usually we would discard, they give value to that, or they give an emotion to that. Your energy, your soul literally has a cord that attaches to it. And so you can see, I see cords, so I see attachments on people and I can read their energy levels. And when you are dealing with someone who is attached to many, many things, it looks like it looks like a network. It looks like tubes, like you're in ICU or something. And that's what hurts so badly when you try to take it away from them. They're literally energetically attached. And this can cause not only anxiety or psychological pain, but physical pain as well. because you're taking that away, you're snapping that cord on a lot of things, and you're forcefully adding to or making them relive that original wound or that trauma again and again and again. And I don't think people understand how that works energetically, but I can see how after a while the kids weren't coming home, and I'm sure you had excuses about why things weren't being maybe taken out or reorganized, let's say. How did you deal with that?
Not very well. I guess I sat on an awful lot of anger and frustration myself. I did try a lot of forced cleanups. I remember one day I was trying to sort. He had a huge just bin full of screws, nails, hammers, tools, all sorts of things. And my son went out and got shelves or little drawer sets for me. And the two of us went through all of the bin and we segregated everything into one drawer because we were both that kind of orderly, I guess. So we had the screws in one drawer, the tools in another, and so on. And he came out and he looked, and I thought he was going to cry. And I just felt so bad that we had interrupted what was comfortable for him. And he said, I don't know what these things are anymore. They're not in the same place. And I've read since then that the visual field, the visual organization is very important to the hoarder. And no one quite knows why at this point, how that connection evolves. But if you disturb the arrangement of things, that seems to provoke even more distress than whatever prompted the things to be put in the pile in the first place.
Wow, that just must be a torturous day-to-day life. And what did your bedroom look like?
Well, I guess in one corner there was a stack of shoes, some old, some never worn, some new, that was about 5 feet high and about 4 feet wide. And I couldn't get to the windows on that side of the room, so I could never open them. And our bathroom in that bedroom became unusable for me. He had stacked up little bottles of things he had used. He wouldn't throw out a plastic bottle ever. So he had them arranged all over the room. And if I touched one, of course, everything would fall down, and he would be upset about that. And at a certain point, he refused to let me clean anything that was something he was going to use. So I had to use a different bathroom in the house. I'm glad we had another one. And he had a real aversion to anyone else cleaning anything all along. And this was constant battling. He would say he didn't like the way the person mopped the floor, or he wanted them to use a different product and he would take care of it, but he would not do it himself. So we had, long years of a very dirty house, I would say. And part of my response to it was to take a job where I had to travel a lot, because I just could not be there all the time.
Right. I don't blame you. Yeah. I don't blame you. And if you don't know how to deal with that and you're constantly on pins and needles about moving things or trying to get at things. Yeah. So on an everyday, let's just say on a good day or a normal day, how many things would he acquire to bring in?
Sometimes I would have said countless. If he went on a trip for business, if he went to a trade show, he would pick up whatever free things were around on tables, and he would come home with a suitcase full of these things. And when he got home, he would spread them out on the living room floor in a trail, and we weren't allowed to disturb the trail. And I learned over time that after about 6 months, the trail seemed not to have meaning for him or some emotional attachment. So I would kind of mentally track when the things went down on the floor and when I could pick them up. And if there was a new trail in the meantime, I couldn't pick that one up too. But in that way, I kind of kept things at bay to some extent. I think there was just so much shame and frustration in our house as I look back, and I don't know now how I did it. I had 2 kids, and I think that was the strongest motivator. I couldn't leave them, and I didn't want to leave him either. So it was family.
Right, right. Well, just like any other type of disorder, whether whether it's bipolar, schizophrenia, or any kind of addictions, or gambling, or whatever the thing is, it gradually kind of gets to the point where you really do need to ask for outside help. And I would think that that is very, very tough, because they're saying that 5% of hoarders actually receive the help that they need. 5%. That's very, very difficult. That means that they are hiding in shame, and they are hiding in pain every single day. And that just breaks my heart, that you can't reach these people. And this particular disorder has not gotten the full blown highlight, like anything else. So my hat's off to you. You are so courageous and so brave to live this experience and to bring it to light, and to actually say, you know what, maybe I can help somebody that needs this type of help. This is fabulous. This is just fabulous on your part. So thank you for, getting it done and getting to the other side of it. I mean, now, did he ever admit that he had a problem?
No, he didn't perceive of it as a problem. If I would say, if I would ask him to clean up, he would say, well, you put your things in filing cabinets, so you save a lot of things too. What's the difference? He didn't understand what it was doing to everyone else. And right. Because of the ADD, he had so many memory problems and inability to find things and forgetting things, and that it was just a truckload of disorder for him. So right. To deal with that alone really probably wasn't ever going to happen.
Right. Was there a specific age where he was really perhaps, really kind of gone off the deep end at all?
Yeah, we were kind of at the end of our rope when he was about 55, and my parents had passed away, and cleaning out the houses was a little challenging because he didn't want me to throw any of their things away. And I finally went for grief counseling. And as I was taught, we had been to this therapist for couples counseling a couple of times. He said, I didn't know this 20 or 30 years ago, that there was such a thing as adult ADHD. And some of the things you're describing are right on track for that. So we did get a diagnosis of multiple disorders for him at that age. And they say that as you get older, you're more likely to develop hoarding, particularly 55 to 70, it often kicks in. So that's when it became pretty serious, yes.
That's when it became serious, right. And there's something else that I in my research as well, there's something else that I've noticed, and that is when children start kicking in their hormones, they start becoming rebellious, and they start, challenging authority, or, you can really see that they're, let's say, just kind of fragmenting, misaligning, trying different things. And until those hormones settle down, they are in a very, very vulnerable state. And this is usually the time where these kids are, gaining their independence and getting a car and going off by themselves to college. And, this is the time when it is, I feel, so vulnerable for their alignment. I see it again in the 50s for men. In the 40s for women, in the 50s for men, and the 50s because of the fact that they're losing their testosterone, they're unbalanced, and this affects the chemistry in the brain. And so when you've got this unbalanced chemistry happening, more than likely, some of these particular disorders have a chance to get in and take over. And I've seen it happen more and more. And I've seen what happens is the perception of their self changes. And depression can set in, or they'll start their behaviors of something that, they've been, let's just say they've been a corporate executive for a while, and then all of a sudden, that chemistry imbalance changes their personality, changes what they want to do. They want to live this crazy life. And everybody always says, oh, that's just, a middle-age crisis. And middle-age crisis can be just that, can be a crisis beyond belief. And this is when, if there's any type of emotional disorder within the family, or anything genetically, if it hasn't come out at 15, to 20, it's definitely going to come out then. It's like when you've had the chicken pox virus, it's going to show up as shingles when you get older. I mean, it's in there and it's going to come out somehow. But the therapy involved, tell me about your experiences. I know you just said, wow, you finally got a diagnosis of ADD, and that's hard to diagnose this age, because everybody multitasks and there's so much going on, especially with, I want to say, just the timeline of things happening so fast that if you are picking up one thing and not finishing it, everybody just sort of, sloughs it off, or your brain is going one way and another way. And you're like, wow, you're a genius. You're doing all these wonderful things. So it's kind of overlooked. So yeah, I would think that would be a hard diagnosis, to really get. And so his family, did you know if there was any type of a genetic string or thread there with his family at all?
It's possible there were similar anxious behaviors, and they did hoard selected items, but they were also Holocaust survivors. And I've also read a theory that when a person has lived through an experience like that, a genocide or a horrible war that requires you to leave your home, that hoarding actually can be genetically rewired into your children. Your DNA changes from suffering that. So I don't know that for a fact, but there was, I think, even an NIH study that said that there might be some connection there. So that may be part of what happened. I don't know.
I have to tell you, when I was doing this research and that came up, as far as having a trauma of someone taking things away, right away I saw a movie, and it was about World War II and how they, rounded them up and they took everything away from them. And right away, I saw the whole movie and I thought, oh my gosh, if this is the root of some of this trauma, I can imagine that it would go through families and, and descendants from them. The same thing about depression. I mean, any type, our grandparents went through the Depression and all of that, and they were always going without, or having their houses taken away, or their crops taken away, or all of that. Their bank accounts crashed. You can imagine the lifestyle that people were living that were completely taken away from them. And you heard about it all the time. And we just casually said, oh, well, they save everything because they went through the Depression, and it's true. And so to be more aware of modern day, what we call hoarding, is, I think, a very complex disorder. It comes from so many places and so many wounds. And I think a lot of us also have our own traumas, and we kind of exchange a wound resonance with people. And we have compassion if somebody is depressed, or they're taking pills, or, you know, they're drinking too much, or, you know, they're gambling, or whatever it is. There's kind of a wound resonance that we see in people when they do quirky things, or they do it, they display excessive behavior, that perhaps we kind of have a camaraderie with these people. And it's hard to get help. It's just hard to get them help. And in your particular book, I know it's a novel, and but in your particular book, the stages that you go through, and I'm not going to give it away, but the stages that you go through, it's quite not only frustrating, but did you feel like you were losing yourself as well?
I did, and there came a day when, as I mentioned, his anger became so great, and I just stopped myself and I said, if I stay here, I'm going to die in this pile of junk. And I don't think that's what I want for myself anymore. And it was suddenly clearer than it had ever been to me that I simply couldn't stay. I had that thought along the way, and I would always push it back down because I didn't want to change things. But on that morning, I realized he might be descending yet another level on his anger scale to a place that I just didn't want to go with him. So he actually would ask me a question sometimes when I wanted to buy something that wasn't usually okay. So it was always some big discussion we had to have about it. And he said, it's not do you have what you want, but do you want what you have? And that morning, that question kicked in for me. And I finally looked around and I said, no, I don't want what I have. I have to go. And it was like a light bulb went off. Wow. And it was so ironic to me that he would always ask me that question when he had so many things, so many things.
And so did you eventually leave the residence?
I did. I went to see an attorney, and I felt I should get a divorce for various reasons. It just seemed like the better path to go. He was very unhappy and angry about it, but I felt it would be better for me if I could just proceed on my own and not constantly have to go back and fix things, because he wasn't really able to manage finances, and I knew my children would come to his aid if he asked them to. But I couldn't take care of anything anymore for him. And so I just felt it was better if I left, not for someone else, as he decided was the reason, but just because I had to go.
Right. So you finally decided to take action and protect your own little child inside of you, that no, this is not, because actually when you're in the middle of hoarding, it's actually a very similar frequency to self-inflicting wounds and self-harm.
Yeah.
And so traumatizing oneself, number one, it's hard to live with. Number two, it's hard to observe. And number three, it's hard to save yourself. And that's one of the hardest things, I think, whether you are in a traumatic relationship or an abusive situation, whether it's verbal or whether it's physical, sexual, financial, whatever that is, that somebody's got a hold on you, it's very difficult to break away from that and to take action for yourself. And in knowing that you had to do that, because he just was obviously not going to stop doing it. His behavior was not showing any signs of slowing down with his disorder. But you mentioned that his anger was out of control. Is this something that goes along with hoarding, the anger?
I'm not sure how related they are. I know that he was having a huge self-esteem crisis as all of these things kind of wound up, and kicked in at about 55. And he was a distinguished professor. He was a very high-functioning, disordered person. And suddenly I think he found that he wasn't able to work very effectively. And I know from having been through my 50s that things do start to tail off a little bit there in terms of how fast you can work, or how efficiently or perfectly you could work. And since he had such a high degree of perfectionism going, his self-esteem was really in peril. And he was angry with me for not propping him up when he was refusing to see that there was a problem with some equipment that he was using. And he just started screaming at me about it. And I thought, well, I don't know what's happening here. And all of a sudden I saw his hand go up in the air as if he were going to hit me. And he stopped himself. And I think that's when, the light bulb went on for me. And I thought, I don't have to stay for this. No, and I can't.
Right, right. So what support did you get for yourself?
Well, I had gone to counseling for many of the years I was married. And we went through some marriage counseling, partly because we felt our family was just getting out of control in terms of kids' behavior and so on. And that was all very helpful to me. And by the time I decided to leave, I knew that I could go back to this counselor, which I did. And my children and I have always been close, I would say, and found our way back to each other, although the event of the suicide was extremely damaging to the whole family. But I'm fortunate, blessed to have grandchildren and a relationship with them, and those are a big part of the repair. And I think actually writing the memoir and the book really made a big difference for me, because until then I wasn't able or interested in seeing all of it clearly so I could understand what I needed to do for myself.
Right, right. And there's, having lived through a suicide from my spouse as well, it's one of those taboo endings. It's a taboo ending. It's something that, I don't know about you, but I was frozen for a good while. Did not know how to deal with it or what to do. And in all of my certifications and all of my know-how, when it came to me going through it, I felt as if I was just doing motion after motion, and kind of wondering, I guess this happens to anybody that, has a loss like that, very traumatic and very sudden, and, but you try not to add it to the trauma in your life, and you say, that was them. That was their ending, and they did it their way, and that you definitely were a part of their life, but that's not going to be your ending. You're going to create your own ending and the rest of your own life. But I feel as though a lot of times you come to this conclusion when you separate, you leave the house and you go get help, like you did, and you took action. And there's something there that divides you. You're not connected in that particular project anymore. And I'm sure after a while, his behavior became a project, for everybody to handle. And when you decided, no, I'm going to stop. If you're not stopping your behavior, I'm going to protect myself. And then that's where you split. And that's what allows you to give him his own ticket for his exit on planet Earth, or anybody else's, and then you decide you're going to live your life and rebuild it the best way and become strong again. So again, my heart, I know what you went through, and my heart is broken in 100 pieces for all of that. But yet, I'm going to tell you something. I'm happily married again for 4.5 years to my Mr. Bill. He's in the chat room, and we are just really enjoying life. So I want to give you that. Yes, I want to give you that. And all of the rest of the people out there, I want to share a comment that's in the chat room. Dr. Marnie Hill Federero. She says, Deborah, your debut novel sounds very interesting. Congratulations. So there you go. Yes, yes. And let's see, here we go. It says, maybe somebody in some small way, oh, I can't read that. Small way, if we are collectors of things like antiques and such. Okay, that's a good comment. When you are collectors of things, like sometimes you collect china, or you collect stamps, or you collect butterflies, or airplanes, or things like that. There is a fine line about having them organized, having them in a prized location where they do not overtake your everyday life and your space, and that they do, for you, of course, have value, but it's not in a compulsive acquisition where, even if you're collecting things, let's just say model cars or something, and you're collecting these, and they get to the point where they are in the pathways of your house, or they are taking every dime that you have, or, they are what's called self-inflicting harm to your everyday life. This is where you draw that particular line. Am I right?
Exactly. That's what specialists say, that if it's interfering with your daily life, it's crossed the line. But you can also look at, Elvis Presley was a kind of hoarder. He had huge collections of cars, many more than he would ever need, but he also had enough room to store them on his property so he could walk through his garage. Right. For someone else, that might have been considered a hoard because of the sheer volume of cars that he had. So I think it's a tricky distinction, but usually it's when your lifestyle, your ability to move around in your own house is impeded by the things that you have.
Right. I mean, I'm all for creative expression. I am all for that, and I think everybody is. I mean, that's why we're here. That's why we're on planet Earth, is to express our creativity. But there is what's called a runaway disorder, a compulsivity to it. And what happens when we're talking about hoarding versus collecting is that once you reach that particular misalignment, you're collecting things that do not have the value you're giving to them, and you're attaching to them emotionally. And they get to the point where, and correct me, you're the one that has lived with this, but do you get to the point where I feel as though it's such a heaviness and such a dense occupying of your ability to even breathe? Did you find that?
Well, certainly, yes. And at a certain point, there were mice coming into the house, and there were bugs, and he didn't see a reason to remove them. And
yeah, that's drawing the line right there.
Yeah.
You had to draw the line right there. So where do we find your book? How do we get a hold of you? I mean, this is just such an interesting subject. And again, you are so courageous to, write the book, shed the light on this particular hard to discuss topic and hard to diagnose what is happening. The support of your family, I know you have the support of your family now. Is that something that was very, very key when you were going through therapy?
Oh, yes. Yes.
Yeah.
They were I think my children were very worried that because they were concerned that I would follow him into the grave, because they felt, you know, older couples who've been married a long time, possibly that would happen. And it did happen to my parents. So they were a little worried about that at first. And I think they've calmed down about that since it's been several years now. And that's not my intention at all. So they were tremendously helpful. And writing the book was another thing that has helped me in the last 3 years. Probably wouldn't have been done without COVID. So I'm grateful in a way, but not happy that that had to be the subject all the time. Yeah.
A useful way of using that time. So how do we get a hold of the book?
Okay, you can purchase it through the major booksellers like Amazon or Barnes & Noble, and they both have Kindle and Nook reader versions of it as well if you prefer to read online. Otherwise, you can order it any place that you know a bookseller or someone who can order books. It's available through my publisher, Woodhall Press in Connecticut. And basically, just Google it and you'll come upon one of those links, and you can order it any place. So it's very easy to obtain. And let's see, my website is deborahgreenhut.com. And I also have another one for my company, which is creativeroomforlearning.com. Might be easier to remember my name. So you can find me there. I have a writer page on Facebook and let's see, a LinkedIn page. So any one of those places, I try to post information about hoarding and about other things I'm doing as a writer or creative artist. And I look forward to hearing from some of you. Thank you.
Great. And are there any groups out there at all that people with this, you know, if they feel as though they know someone or they have this, you know, they're on the verge of maybe collecting a little too much, that they can, you know, kind of be a part of a tribe that's, you know, that they can learn about this? Are there any groups out there?
Sure. There are a number of groups on Facebook for children of hoarders or friends and relatives of hoarders. So you can search under hoarder, and all of those will probably come up too. There is something called the SchulmanCenter.com, which handles hoarding and also addiction. TheRecoveryVillage.com is another website I've seen. And the International OCD Foundation, which is iocdf.org, had a lot of information about hoarding because it was once considered a kind of a subset of OCD. Mm-hmm. And I guess Anxiety and Depression Association of America is another. So there are a lot of places to go, but please keep in mind that people are not in agreement about what causes it yet. So you want to find someone who is receptive to hearing other reasons, you know, or other concerns. So if you're not happy with your therapist, you know, find one that helps you to get a handle on it, or help the other person who's hoarding to find someone who can really work with them. As you said, very few, 5%, may actually come through it and be able to get to the other side. And I want to emphasize, the best thing you can do is stop it early, because once it gets into the final levels, it's very difficult to move someone away from that behavior.
Right. This was highlighted on a TV show as well. Many of us had seen the program and had seen the conditions that these people live in quite normally. And we all know, you know, how taxing that can be for a family, for the relationship, and how much pain and shame and guilt that these people carry. And they're very delicate. And just like any other disorder or misalignment, it's not this one alone. And, you know, hope is there. All we need to do is throw the light on it, and we'll be able to surround it with a lot of love and compassion, and we will figure it out. We will figure it out how to align these people and move forward, even if it's some type of perhaps a hypnosis therapy as well. If you're into alternative solutions, I can see that that would be very helpful, I think, as well, in getting to the root trauma and perhaps facing that and releasing a lot of the wounds that are inside of all of us. And so that we can go ahead and go forward, because as Earth itself is moving into this photon belt, I mean, we've got to unload a lot of this this trauma that we have been carrying for generations. Not only that, but we also have to unload a lot of the karma as well. And once we do that, we can, take the yellow brick road to the new world, the new earth that is being formed for us. Deborah, thank you so much for being on the show. What a wonderful project, and congratulations on everything you do. And I also want to say that there's suicide prevention numbers, 800 numbers are in your area as well. If you know someone who is feeling overwhelmed with life, please reach out. It's better to reach out beforehand than to feel as though you should have. So
I have that number if you'd like it.
Yes, we do.
There's a national number. It's 1-800-273-8255.
Very
and
good.
the last number spell out the word talk. So it's 1-800-273-TALK.
Very good. Thank you for that. Thank you for that. Well, from New Jersey, and I'm in Florida, we are right here, 27 degrees Sag, coming to you from the Galactic Center. Thank you so much for coming along with us this evening. And remember, next week, we are going to have the show 1 hour later at 7 p.m. Get your questions to me. If you have any type of questions, I would love to throw a little attention on that in a psychic manner and answer any questions that you would have. Thank you so much. Thank you, Deborah, again. And until next time, may the angels protect you and guide you. Good night, everyone.
Good night.